I've not met one woman in my life who doesn't have issues with her body. Men are revered and celebrated. They're the silver fox for aging. The woman.
Dr. Amanda Hanson, clinical psychologist, leading expert, and women's coach.
Why are we now celebrating injecting yourself with toxins and calling that the new 80? 20-year-old girls whose moms are taking them now to get procedures done for their 20th and 21st birthday.
How did we get her?
Fear. Capital F-E-A-R.
She's helped thousands of women heal and reconnect with their feminine nature and is on a mission to revolutionize aging for women.
What I want is our young girls to look up and see there is actually a different way.
I'm scrambling to make sense of this information as you're giving it to me. I'm like, hold on, what, how, why? As a guy also.
And what a privilege. You're exactly right.
What can I do as a man for the woman to feel accepted?
Yes, I love this question.
Never make excuses for a man's behavior for any reason, especially not on his traumatic childhood. This is a quote from one of your videos. Tell me more.
Yes, I think that after sitting with so many women in sessions and in groups, my clients in particular, who have told me, well, he does this with me, he treats me this way, but I really have to give him grace. I have to understand. I have to make space for forgiveness. He really did come from a very difficult childhood. And I hear women get stuck in this loop over and over and over again, and years and decades pass, and they're still telling the same story. And it creates the situation where the partners, often the men, are not owning their responsibility for their dynamic in this whole relationship. So it is amazing in the way that a woman keeps propping it up and allowing it. And I help her understand how she's unconsciously benefiting from that and allowing that behavior to continue, and helping her to open her eyes to see that there is a huge responsibility on him as well, because none of us are responsible for what happened to us as children. But every one of us is responsible for what we do with it now as adults. And using that as a crutch and as an excuse, I don't have any tolerance for that in relationships.
Do you feel, Amanda, that this has become more and more present in our society in the recent times, where we've just been holding on to our past so much more, or have been talking about how, our life is so much more because, so much more stuck because of this past scenario that we have had?
I definitely think that we are in a more introspective place in just society in general and where we've evolved to. When I look back to my grandparents, even my own parents, there wasn't the level of introspection necessarily as openly, readily available for people, for the masses. And because of social media, I think more and more people are understanding the influence that their past may have had on them. But here's the tricky part, is to understand it is one thing. To hold on to it as the life raft of like, this is my identity, this is how I will define myself in every space and every place, is where we can get really stuck. I found myself doing that as a young woman. I was the girl who kept telling the story that I was the girl whose father left when she was 10 years old. And when I continued to use that as a part of my identity, it allowed me to stay super safe in relationships with the opposite sex, because it built this wall and protected me. Because if I was the girl whose father left, I never had to let my guard down. And it actually served me. Well, on the surface, I would have told you that storyline wasn't serving me. What, are you kidding me? Mm-hmm. But if I was really honest with myself and I started digging and digging many, many years later, I realized it was actually my protection. That's why I kept telling the story and holding on to my victim life raft. So I think that to release it means we now have to evolve into another version of ourselves, which requires not just a lot of work, but a lot more vulnerability and truth. And I think that is ultimately what's at the base of why we avoid releasing. It's one thing, acknowledge the past, but don't make it your only identity.
Do you feel that sometimes it may be the case that the man also doesn't realize, or I'm saying man just because of the context of the conversation, it could be replaced with man, women, however, that they don't even realize, and say, if they don't realize, what would be a good way to bring it up so they can finally recognize that, oh crap, I've just been holding on and I'm making this a safety thing. I'm making it a defense thing versus trying to actually move forward with it. How do we bring up that conversation?
Yes, I think I've brought up difficult conversations with not just clients, but even my own husband. And I like to use the words like, are you ever curious about the possible connection to how that happened, that early formative thing happened for you, and the story that it now tells in your daily life as a 57-year-old man, right? So I think it's a gentle, beautiful, invitational way to approach somebody to say, are you ever curious? And I do a lot of use of examples of my own life. I feel like creating vulnerability for others that you care about starts with showing our own. And so I'll often use my own life example and say, for me, what I really discovered was that I often found myself in this pattern. And so I think when you're really building a bridge with somebody and you really care about them, you're going to share from your own place of vulnerability and ask them, are you ever curious about that for yourself?
And that conversation unfolds beautifully for you. Don't you find any resistance from the guy, or generally it's like, no, that's not true. That's not happening for me. Maybe it's true for you.
I have not come up against that with my partner because I think that he has been watching me, as we have 4 young adult children now, and he watched me do this for so long with the children. It's a language that we have in our home now. But if you do have a conversation with someone that you care about and they come back with that initial defense, you can reflect back to them. I remember feeling, I totally understand if this feels like too much right now, or there's no connection to that, just something you might want to sit with. I remember when that started to happen for me, I was like, oh, absolutely not, which is true. I was in defense of of that message for myself. So again, share your story, share your example or someone else's example to invite them in closer. It's not a judgment. It's just a curiosity.
What are some of the common patterns that you've seen for individuals that you've coached, trained, that they have observed either in men or themselves that they carry from childhood? We understand that, or from what you shared before, that it is for a sense of safety.
Yes.
And I can totally feel that I must be doing certain things like that as well, even today, unconsciously, of course. What are some of the through lines that you might have seen? It's like, hey, here are certain patterns that if anybody was listening right now, look out for.
Yes.
Here are certain things that we see are more common in society, or with men, let's say specifically.
Yes. I think that at the root of any of those behaviors of really attaching to the old identity and not wanting to evolve past that, I think at the root of it is a fear of who will I become without this very obvious definition of how I've been living. I know how to live within these confines. So I think there's fear of that. I think there's fear of failure. There's fear of vulnerability. There's fear of being left. So fear of abandonment. At the root of almost every human suffering, I find when you really distill it down, is almost always abandonment. Abandonment of the love, abandonment of the storyline, abandonment of the way you were living, and now I'm not sure what I'll step into. So at the most baseline, I think that's where we all hold on and attach to certain things, because we don't want to abandon that story, that narrative, or we don't want to be abandoned by somebody else. And I'm always saying to clients, but ultimately, you are abandoning yourself. You are abandoning yourself by not allowing yourself to grow and step into this more beautiful version that the world needs you to be fully blossomed.
That is so true. That is so true. If as a person who's listening to the podcast, and let's say as a man myself, because I'm also aware that I might be having patterns myself,
Right.
What would be some curious questions that I could ask myself, or discoveries I could have, or patterns I can look for where I might be holding on to something that are just not present to me? Because I almost feel a lot of times we're just unaware. It's not like we are.
Yes.
It's not that we are trying to go around hurt people. It just, we don't even know we are hurting someone.
Yes. This is the interesting thing, is I think that we have to begin to live more consciously. So I always tell women that if there were a warning label that came with working with me, it would become that when you step into working with me, your level of conscious living is going to be sometimes really hard to face. So what I'm going to ask you to do, what I'm going to invite you to do on this journey, is to be more consciously observing your patterns, yourself, almost as if you kind of hover above at times and notice, like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder why I said that. Oh, that's interesting. I wonder why they looked at me when I said it that way. I wonder, what's going on with me inside? Oh, I notice I keep doing that thing over and over with my employees, or every time my mother calls. I keep finding myself in this pattern. And the biggest red flag, I think, is when we are constantly blaming everyone else in our lives for the problems, for the relationship, for the work environment, for everything. There's a place to really pay attention. When you start to make everything everyone else's or every situation's fault, that is a place to say, oh, I caught myself, I'm doing that again. Where have I played a part or a role in this interaction right now? So that's a place I think that we can really catch ourselves. But again, it's going to take someone who's willing to kind of transcend out of the human experience and say, what's going on here? I find myself continuing to be in this same fight over and over again with my partner. What part am I playing? What fear am I holding on to? Why can't I show up differently? Right?
Interesting. And what is present to me right now is I can't think of something immediate right now that feels like that, oh, this is right now I'm in a pattern. That's why I was so curious if there was something that I could ask myself or stay present to that would tell me, okay, there's a pattern that you want to be mindful of.
Yes.
Because again, I'm unaware of it, right?
Yes.
I'm in the story. I don't know what the story looks like from the outside, but I do remember one of the older stories, and I've never told this before. And it's terrible. It will reflect terrible on me. So we'll see if it makes the final cut or not, but I'll tell it anyways.
I love it. The vulnerability.
And the story is, it's about 9 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago. I had just started as a coach, and I had hired first set of people for my team. And I am somebody whose sense of humor is very self-deprecating. Like, I make fun of me, and then I make fun of people around me because everybody's in the game then, right?
Yeah.
We're all playing the game of this is funny because we're all so ridiculous, right? We all have our nuances and we say stupid things, and I'm okay with somebody make fun of me, and I feel comfortable making fun of my friends, right? So one of the cases, which I only realized how wrong it was later, is that I had not met my now wife and then girlfriend. I hadn't met her at that time. But what was happening was I was going through this transition in my life. I had ended my previous relationship, and I was in this gap of a year, 2 years, where I was with multiple partners and so on and so forth.
Right.
But during that phase, I had one team member. Actually, I was doing it with every team member, but this particular team member was getting the butt of my joke. She was a female. And one of the jokes I would crack, and she was a very fit person. Like, like you're a very fit person. If I said you were fat, you would go, you're an idiot, right? Especially if you laugh right after that, right? In my head, I thought I was being super funny.
Oh, yeah.
Like in my head, I was like, this is so hilarious because everybody was laughing, including her, right? So I would crack, not explicitly those words, but I would imply that she has gotten on some weight. She did not have any weight on her. Like, she was very fit. There was no reason for, at least in my head, there was no reason that this is actually hurting her, right? So I was speaking from really good intent. And to me, it was completely like, everybody's laughing. This is funny. We can keep on going on with a joke. Like, nobody's being weird about it. And nobody's telling me anything, right? So now this is probably 6 months into this joke at this point, and my wife then is a friend, comes into my life, and I crack a similar joke on her because I think it's funny because she's also incredibly fit and very beautiful and everything. Like, this is a joke. Of course this is a joke. So I go on and say that, and she goes, "Did you know that this could actually hurt people?" Like, what do you mean? This is like, of course this is a joke. Like, of course, like, who would, like, dude, you're underweight if anything. And she's like, yeah, but you don't know what's their backstory. Yeah. Right? And how it may affect it. Yeah. So you should check in if you actually have cracked this joke to anybody else. Now, this was me getting aware, suddenly going, oh, fuck. Oh. Have I done something wrong here? Right. Because in my head, until now, I was just a funny guy. Yeah, I was just no malintent. I was just being funny in my head. Right? Yeah. So I go and I ask this girl, I was like, hey, listen, I've been cracking this joke for probably 6 months now. This is okay, right? And I had never checked that in before because in my head, I just thought it was funny, right? And I asked her this question, and it broke my heart, and actually took away me even trying to crack a joke for probably 3 years after, because I was so scared of cracking any joke. Because she says, Ajit, you don't know, but I've always had body issues. And I have seen myself as, somebody who is not fit, not healthy, not this, not that. And I've had eating disorders in the past. So sometimes when you'd crack that joke, I would go home and cry. And this was a friend of mine. Like, this is somebody I love, appreciate. In no way I would ever hurt her. and that's what I was really trying to get, is like sometimes we as men are idiots in some way. Our emotional intelligence works different, I think, or at least mine was at that time. And I recognized, crap, I didn't even realize for 6 months, and nobody around me had either the balls to say it or could put me aside and say, dude, like, do you realize this is actually probably bad, what you're doing? And I was just blind to it. That's where my question originates from, because I would really hope at that time I could hear a podcast that would tell me, oh crap, I was doing something wrong.
Yes.
And how do I get present to that?
Yes.
Because in my head at that time, it was just so funny.
Yes. And first, kudos to your wife for, your girlfriend, a friend at the time, for pointing that out and what that led to. Secondly, one thing I just want to, I think is relevant to say, I'll actually circle back to, but I want to also say that I think oftentimes when we are cracking jokes, guys, girls, anybody, it is because of our own lack of comfort with vulnerability. Because what you're really saying underneath the joke is it's a form of trying to make a connection with somebody else, right? Yeah. And often I think men can defer to that more than women can. We can tend to be more honest with each other and vulnerable in connection, where it might feel uncomfortable or awkward for a man to say something just beautiful and kind. And so it can come out in the form of insults, jokes, but really with the intention of hoping to connect. And that's rarely successful especially with women. And one thing I think that's worthy of noting here, as a woman who's been working with women, I'm 51 years old myself, and I've been working with women. I'm a clinical psychologist for over 25 years. I've not met one woman in my life, not a client, not a friend, not a mother, not a grandmother, not my daughter, not a woman in my life who doesn't have issues with her body. Not a woman. I need that to be heard and understood. So we are in a really hard time, probably more than we've ever been as women. And I see it through the lens of my 21-year-old daughter with all that comes through on social media. We are not in a good place in the world for women. The assault of information, the average woman is exposed to 4,000 ads a day telling her about her lack of worthiness. Obviously, all of those marketing campaigns have to sell fear so that you can become enslaved to toxic beauty culture and buy forever. We now don't even know what human faces look like. We're getting further and further removed from an aging woman's face. Men are called revered and celebrated. They're the silver fox for aging. The woman is cast aside in society. We don't pay attention to the woman. She's not esteemed anymore. If she can't give you children, if she's not sexy or good enough to look at, we push her aside. So we have a really big, I think, state of terrorism, if you will. I'd go as far as to say that, because I'm working with those women on the front lines of all ages, all races, all shapes, size, everywhere in the world. I have clients on on every continent, every major country, and everyone is suffering with their body. The amount of resources and time and money that go into women trying to heal and fix those issues with their body, this is why we will never catch up to men financially nor surpass them, because we're putting our energy and our money in all of the wrong places. So it's a really big epidemic that does not get talked about, I think, nearly enough. And it's continuing to get worse and more perpetuated by women of my generation who are in terror about aging.
Interesting. You're probably right in most everything, I would think. I don't know about the body issues. I would love to know more on why does that happen and what can we do as men, just generally to be able to support that. I have a daughter. She's 2.5 now, but I don't know. I haven't dealt with those situations just yet. So I'd love to get educated on it so I can support that. I do believe that women leaders are going to be more and more present just because of their emotional intelligence is so high. There is no way men stand a chance of competing with a woman. Like I truly believe so. And I say that also because 80% of my team is women. And more successful leaders have recognized you put a women leader in position versus a man, they're more likely to achieve the goals. The team is happier. The overall NPS score of clientele is higher. Effectively, a female leader CEO is more likely to create long-term success of business than a male leader. It's by data. I can agree to it because I have seen it myself. In my reality, if you look around my teams, you look around our authors, they always tend to be more women. And the reason is simply because of that. is because they tend to be way smarter than men when it comes to leadership, which is what is rewarded the most. There is a situation that we are in because of our past, because there's not enough women that were in the workforce. So because of that, the average of the top leaders is not the same that it should be. But I almost feel like that's going to change in the next 10 years, if not 20 for sure.
Yes.
At least that's my perspective on it, at least workforce wise. But that doesn't solve the issue that you're talking about.
No, and I completely agree with you. I think the collaboration aspect of women, where we join together to say, how can we solve this together? Exactly. I think that if we had women in top leadership around the world, we wouldn't see any of the things that were happening right now with the absurd amounts of people and the genocides of what's happening. But what I'm talking about is a slightly different issue. I'm in a different lane. And what I'm talking about is there is a silent leadership that doesn't speak in words. It speaks when someone walks into the room. And what I'm talking about is the leadership and the art of aging as women. That's what I'm talking about. That's what's missing in society. In our basically Western part of the world, we don't see women presenting. We now have, Martha Stewart at almost 80 years old on the cover of a magazine filled with Botox and fillers and all of the things, and we call that success. We call that, this is the new 80. Actually, no, it's not. That's not the new 80. Why are we now celebrating injecting yourself with toxins and calling that the new 80? Why are we not celebrating the way men age? Why can't we let women age that way and call that a celebration? Why is she only celebrated if she's 80 when she actually looks like she's 40? That's the war I'm talking about. 20-year-old girls whose moms are taking them now to get procedures done for their 20th and 21st birthday. The girls, my daughter is a junior in college, and she doesn't have a single friend who doesn't have Botox or fillers. And she says, Mom, I'm only immune to it because I'm watching you. So if you don't have that kind of silent leadership in the home or in corporations or on magazines or walking in the world, we don't believe it exists. We don't have representation. I have so many people in my family, friends, my producer who can tell you, I cannot go anywhere in public anymore without young girls coming up to me crying, thanking me for my work. They said, we don't have any leaders. We don't have any women who are out in the world aging and doing it in a way that makes us not scared. Thank you. Please never stop speaking. I have so many messages in my DMs, I can't even get through them on the daily with women of all ages all around the world. Someday, actually, that's a project we should do, is screenshot endless so we can make a book of that. The messages women send me, please don't stop speaking. Thank you for being our lighthouse. That's the war I'm speaking of.
How did we get to this place? So I can have a better understanding. How did we get to this place where I totally hear you. I didn't know about the 20-year-olds that are getting Botox. I'm unaware of that
even younger.
whole situation. I don't understand
18.
why either. I mean, you're 20. You don't even later you don't really need it, but 20 you are at the prime of your youth. Yeah,
but everyone's using
I don't
filters
get it. Like,
online.
in my head, I'm like, and I'm scrambling to make sense of this information as you're giving it to me. I'm like, hold on, what, how, why?
You'll experience
like
it firsthand when your daughter.
As a guy also, right? Clearly, it doesn't make sense.
And what
to
a
me.
privilege.
Yeah.
And what a privilege. As a guy also, I don't even know. You're exactly right. What a privilege to not even understand the daily reflection back in the mirror and the continuing of berating everything that you see, because we've been raised on a culture. We watch our moms do it in the mirror. We grow up and we watch our moms do it. We turn on the TV, we see it. We go onto social media, we see it. Everyone's filtered. No one even has a laugh line. When's the last time you actually have seen a woman with a forehead line or a laugh line around her face when she ages? when she smiles. So if you see it reflected back to you immediately, the signal goes up. Something's wrong. Something's wrong. I got to get this fixed. Why did that part of my face just move?
How did we get her?
First of all, women have always been terrified of aging because I see couples walking down the street where the man has gray hair. And in the shape of the arch of their back and the slowness of their pace, you can tell they're probably similarly aged. I see this time and again. The man has snow white regal hair. The woman's hair is jet black, dark brown. Why is he granted permission to age and she's not? So one of the only things we had to date was hair dye and maybe occasionally a really radical procedure like a facelift, which most women couldn't afford nor take 6 weeks off from work to do. But here comes the invention of Botox, 12 years ago. Here's a handy solution, ladies. Come on in. You don't even miss a day of work. We'll give you a little injection. You'll look like fresh face. Get back to the real you. Connect with the younger you inside. That campaign started, and it became innocuous. Oh, I brush my teeth every day, paint my nails once a month, get my Botox every 3 months. It just became a part of what they then sold to women as self-care. So now we've sold it under the guise of not just self-care, but also feminism. Now we call it feminism, that every woman has the right to choose. I think that we are doing, I mean, I know firsthand the mess we are making for the next generation of girls.
I completely agree with you. What's the underlying emotion that a woman feels that the society is tapping into? Of course, clearly for capitalistic gains and for gains of certain economies and so forth. But what's the underlying emotion that a woman can be present to if they are finding themselves, for lack of a better term, and I'm searching for it really, but let's say if they're getting attracted to, oh, at 20, I should get a Botox. So what's the underlying emotion, challenge, except what is that?
Fear.
Fear of what?
Capital F-E-A-R. It's fear.
Of what?
Fear of not being chosen because you won't be pretty enough. Your face won't be flawless enough. Fear of not being chosen. Fear of being rejected.
Chosen by other women or chosen by men?
Well, accepted by women. It's a women's thing too, right? Like women I've had more women in my age range say things to me. I have men stop me on the street all the time and tell me how exquisite your hair is so beautiful. It's so amazing to see an aging woman. It's so powerful. It's so sexy. We never see it anymore. I have had women have always been the ones who tell me, you know, your lips are so tiny. Have you thought about getting like filler? Your lips would be so much prettier. I bet your husband would love that, a full lip. I've had women say to me, you know, you have that like genetic under eye bags. Have you ever thought about getting that surgery for that? Now women say to me, wow, you're so brave. How do you do it? Like, what does your husband think of your gray hair and all your wrinkles? So men don't get asked these things, right? Just like men don't get asked when they go to work, who's taking care of your children while you're working. So it's the absurdity of it all. But at the base is fear. Fear I won't be chosen by a man. Fear of I may be left by a man for a younger woman if I start to show that I'm getting older. Fear that your girlfriends will be embarrassed to be seen out with you because you're older when you all go to the dance club and you don't do the Botox. Fear that I might be let go at my job because I'm actually aging now. I sat next to a very well-known newscaster when I was at Formula One last May, and she was crying to me saying that even though her two counterparts were one in their 60s, year-old man and a 70-year-old man, visible signs of aging, she was turning 40 and they were already putting her on a phase-out plan for more back studio work. I was like, oh, isn't this interesting? And she said, you don't understand. For any capital, financial capital, and a space at a table, you're only welcome there as long as you look young. So it's fear of every aspect of our lives. Fear we won't be fuckable, fear we won't be lovable, fear we won't be hireable. Every fear, it pervades us.
And clearly it's being propagated by culture and of course clearly by certain segments of society for sure.
And now women are really, I mean, the marketing campaigns are like, oh, this is awesome. We barely have to do our work anymore. All the women are doing it for us.
Yes, I feel like the overall society look good is even coming to men. It's not limited to women anymore. It probably is not as pervasive. I'm not in any way trying to discount that, but I know men doing stem cells, starting to do Botox, like I know all of it. Doing what the male version of that looks like to be more accepted in society at large. For that's, I think, more a consequence of social media, of us looking at other people thinking I could have that, and that the hard part, and is that even the right thing or not thing? I think those questions have been thrown out of the window.
Yeah, and I think the question of is like, where's the spirituality in that?
Yeah.
We talk so much, this big game of everyone's so spiritual. And I'm like, you know what the most spiritual thing I do every day is I watch myself age in front of that mirror in a modern world and show up on social media unfiltered. That's the most spiritual thing I know how to do in a modern world where my feet are actually on this ground.
Thank you for doing that, first of all.
You are very welcome.
Thank you.
I do it for my 21-year-old daughter, first and foremost. Yes, thank you. And for your daughter and for all the girls who I want them to have an alternative storyline.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I don't really care what other women are deciding individually, to each her own. What I want is our young girls to look up and see there is actually a different way.
Let's say if there was you, and let's assume for a second that your husband is, or maybe we describe your husband, and that might be a way to do this. But the
Yes.
question is, what would a woman want from a man?
What would a woman want from a man?
Yeah, somebody who is like, who's like, I want to gracefully age.
Oh,
What
in
is the
regards
way
to
I can,
aging.
yeah,
Okay.
how does a man show up
Okay.
for a woman to, because, okay, so another context, I actually find women aging the most beautiful thing ever.
Yes.
Like, I've always been women that are older than me.
Yes.
I appreciate their beauty because I appreciate their mind. Usually they come with a beautiful set of experience. They come with a lot of acceptance. Like, you clearly are very accepting of yourself. So
Very.
I actually find it fascinating.
Yeah.
I don't care for anything. You don't need to do anything.
Right.
For me, that's how my mother is. Maybe that's also one of the reasons why,
Yes.
is because she wouldn't even wear makeup if she doesn't really like, if somebody doesn't tell her to, which also is her stuff. But she's one of those women.
Right.
So I love and appreciate it. I'm fully accepting of it. But let's say as a man, I'm listening and I'm going, hey, I want to make that affirmation for my daughter. I want to make that affirmation for my wife. I want to make that affirmation for my friends. And clearly I've done some stupid shit in my past, like I shared with you. Yeah. What can I do as a man for the woman to feel accepted? If that's a good way to frame that question.
I love this question. I think things first and foremost, like, baby, I am so excited to watch our journey together as we age. It's so beautiful. Or my husband has said for many years along the way, if I start laughing, way back in like my late 30s, early 40s, he would say things like, oh my gosh, the lines around your eyes are so beautiful. He's like, there's Hayden, there's Ava, there's Naquan, there's Jax. Like the stories of our lives, of our family. I mean, I could cry thinking about it. Why would I want to erase those? Why would I want to take those away? My whole story lives on my face. I want to hold my grandbaby someday and they look up and they see lines and they see the beautiful etching. They see the architecture of my skin and my face and part of them in me. I don't want them to see reflected back a frozen, I don't know, mannequin face. I want them to see a grandmother. That is the art of this whole experience. It's the art of, for me, it is the art of aging. And so I think that if you are a partner, if you are a husband, you talk about it in the energy of like, this journey we will walk together and the beauty of it. Even for a woman with stretch marks, for her man to like kneel in front of her and be in awe and honor and like to kiss that part of her belly and like really pay serious reverence. How miraculous is her body? That she carried your baby inside of her body. She allowed her body to magically do whatever it needed to do to build and nourish this little being that you now get to call your daughter. Why would we ever want to take that away? It's the most beautiful art in the world. We go to museums to see art. Look at people. People as they're aging, our art, are all the most incredible stories. And I also think, I grew up working, and one of my jobs in college was working at a nursing home on the Alzheimer's unit. And I have forever been fascinated by people who are much, much older and find them to be the key wisdom holders of our society. And I think it's just so powerful in every aspect. So celebrating it.
So what I'm hearing is, as a man, one thing that you could do is to appreciate the beauty of the maturity, appreciate the beauty of aging, or the signs of aging, because they are beautiful as marks of experience of life. How you appreciate somebody's experience or past is the same way that you kind of communicate. So it's affirmative, and they don't feel like they need to cover it or hide it, and they can feel safe. Am I understanding this right? Am I hearing you right?
Yes, absolutely. And the glory of it all, right? And just pointing out how beautiful you think she is along the way. I think that's really incredible. I've had many people say to me, Amanda, it's so easy for you though, because you've been married 27 years. If you got divorced, you would run out and color your hair and start getting Botox, which of course I never would. To which I always answer, no, I wouldn't even cross my mind. As a matter of fact, I double down. Because then if I'm in the world at an event, if I'm somewhere and a man sees me from across the room and finds this intriguing and wants to come over and strike up a conversation, then there's a better chance that we will be an energetic match than me posing and trying to look like I'm 20 years younger than I am. So no, I would certainly, if I ever found myself single, would be this way even more so, like even more assuredly.
Yeah, no, and that's wonderful. If there was a woman that was listening to this conversation, which probably there is tons of them because our audience tends to be very heavily bent on females. Let's say they are doing the struggle, right? They're in this phase where they're going, I've done the Botox and I've done it because yes, but now let's say as listening to this conversation, they go, I recognize that I'm putting a facade. Let's say, I don't know if I'm using the right terms. Please totally correct me if I go off chain because I'm touching on a sensitive topic that I'm not fully aware of considering I am a man. So if let's say a woman goes, yeah, I hear Amanda, I think she's right. What would be some inquiries that they could have at this point for them to start to accept for where they are in life, to continue to accept and take the path that you have taken?
I would say first and foremost, endless compassion. Start with endless compassion for yourself. That I can see it. I can see it so clearly how easy it is to get swept away by that river. So start with massive compassion for yourself. Identify, gosh, if I really peel it back and I go back to the beginning of whenever this started for me, of course, this is only for women who are interested in a different storyline. How do I think I got there? What story was I telling myself the first time I booked that appointment? What fear really lived underneath it? And let me take a minute and ask myself, like really, not even ask myself, but feel for it. Is that my truth? Is that my belief? Or is it possible I absorbed that toxic belief from a world culture? Because what I have found for myself and most of my clients on any topic is oftentimes we're walking around the world and we think we have these certain beliefs. But when you really start to strip it away, you find out, oh my God, that wasn't actually your belief at all. You just heard it for enough years from enough places, confirmed over and over, that you just absorbed it and was like, yeah, I believe that too. You weren't necessarily given the opportunity or ever brave enough to dissect it and find out, oh my gosh, that was never even my belief. How the heck did I've done that with things in my life. So compassion, and then start to understand and identify. When I close my eyes and I sit with the truth of my womb space as a woman, do I believe that as a woman ages, do I believe she is less worthy of taking up space in this world? Do I believe she's less worthy of walking into a room with wrinkles on her face or a silver hair on her head? And if you believe that to be true, there's probably some work to do. If you believe that to not be true, there's still some work to do, but in a different direction, right? Yeah. So it's just about coming back to just starting with compassion. We have been so duped. And that's what I want to scream from the mountaintops is like, sisters, it's been a huge marketing campaign. It's a lie that has enslaved you to being so far away from the profound, exquisite beauty that lies within that we can't see.
One of the things that I've observed in men that go for external beauty, let me just call it that. Not that aging is not external beauty, it's still beautiful, but I don't know how to frame it. So I'm loosely using these terms.
No, absolutely.
But the young beauty, for example, is also because, and I'm thinking about my friends who have fallen for that trap and eventually then recognized that it was their own insecurity. Like they want to be accepted in society and they think that's how they will get accepted, especially when they become famous, especially when they get rich. Especially then they feel like, oh, I need to have somebody that is a younger partner because it'll sound so
no, you could
bad,
say it,
but it sounds like
we know that women know this.
Yeah, it's like it's almost like my token. This is finally my prize.
My
almost.
object.
My object, my prize.
My object.
I have it all.
Right.
And I've also seen them behind the scenes, not front facing. Front facing, they show the glam. But behind the scenes, when you sit down and you're just having a conversation, they'll also go, I am so empty. Like, I am not in love. This is not love. This is, I did it because that was, quote unquote, the right thing or what I heard I should be doing. But I really want that real person, actually, because who doesn't? Like,
right.
Even if you see that on whatever magazine or whatever, but if you really talk to a mature guy, they don't want to have an immature conversation either. Like, it's not that like as at least that's my experience of life. The more I'm growing older, the less I want to have a conversation with a 20-year-old, not because I don't like them, but it's just like I want a 20-year-old,
You're in a
but that
different
talks
place.
like a 40-year-old. You know what I mean? I
Right.
don't want a 20-year-old that talks like a 20-year-old.
Right.
I've also had life experience. I don't want to have immature conversation.
Right.
I want them to, when I look at them, I should feel like we are energetically together.
Yes.
It's a dance. It's
Yes.
not a, you know, like, oh, fine, you look good by my side and that's why I need
I
you.
can't even imagine how vapid it would be.
Yeah. And it is lonely for them. They realize it later.
I believe it. Well, I think in the same way that toxic beauty culture has sold the fear of aging to women, I think that our world has also sold to men this fear of not being considered like the man if he can't score that beautiful object next to him, right? I think that there is something that it's almost like you said, like a status, like a Ferrari would be a status, or a yacht would be a status. A younger woman is a status, but it's going to take the hands of men to, like Audre Lorde says, that the tools that built the master's house will not be the tools that dismantle it. So if men want something different, then they would need to start showing up in that way. You can't expect that you're going to actually have depth and richness from a place where someone is surviving on fear. It's just and I think also we've sold this, with the 15-year-old, the average, 15-year-old white American woman was considered by Victoria's Secret and Abercrombie and Fitch to be considered the ideal woman in the world. So when we set that kind of standard, think about, we are infantilizing women. Mm-hmm. So if you look a day over 15, you're not considered beautiful anymore. It's like, it is a very sick and twisted culture. And of course, porn culture perpetuates that too, of like the young tight body, the young woman. It's so for men, it's as pervasive because you all, not saying all men are watching porn, but are also bringing that information into your consciousness a lot and starting to believe that to be that strong macho man, it's that woman. And also I think there's a fear of the older wisdom holder kind of a woman because she speaks her truth and she's harder to please in bed because she's not going to take a couple of, jackhammer moves to be excited. She's going to require some serious lovemaking and passion. And if you don't have that capability, you're not going to be able to be with a mature woman who knows her way around the bedroom.
That is very true. And that's so beautifully said, because I do think that is also education that we lack in society overall. Mm-hmm. Like it's in our circles, so at least it's a little bit more present. Also because of the culture that I come from, we have at least some education. Not that my culture had any education. I am from India. Yes. But my culture generations ago had some education in the format of Tantra and everything. So, and that tends to be our group of people here at Mind Valley and Mind Valley Coach, that we do talk about those things at least a little bit. Not that everybody's educated in it, but it definitely is a lot more about real pleasure and not the porn culture like you were talking about. It's not just do this and you're done. It's actually more immersive lovemaking experience.
Yes.
If there was a coach that was currently going into the world and they were in the space of helping women realize their power, realize their fullness, realize their authentic self, and be not just external beauty, but everything. What are some of the most powerful tools that you've found has helped women really recognize that and realize that?
So this would be saying this for a coach.
For a coach or for any woman, really, a coach can utilize it as a tool.
Absolutely. I'm of the firm belief I can't take my clients to places I'm unwilling to go or have never been. So I can't teach you about accepting your inherent power, beauty. I can't teach you how to walk away from a secure situation. I can coach you theoretically, but if I don't have the resonance of that inside of my body, I'm only gonna be able to take you so far. So for me, I think the reason so many women hire me and trust me is because I'm a living embodiment of my work. So everything I teach, I do. I teach you grief practice, but first I demonstrate grief practice. I teach you vulnerability, but first I show you vulnerability. I'm not on a pedestal above anybody. I am on the same playing field as everyone. So I show you how to get there by means of demonstration always and first in my own life. And that includes the aging. That includes the spirituality of aging for me. So I can't instruct people to do things, go to places that I haven't experienced deep in my nervous system. That's my philosophy, and that's the ethics by which I coach and lead. There are people that I refer out because I'm a serious stand for, I want to do well by people who give me a lot of money. And if I don't feel like we're a good fit, I'm going to have the integrity to know when it's time to pass you somewhere else. So I think that's important to know. Know what your wheelhouse is. Don't try to be everything to everyone. Stay in your lane. What is it that you, first and foremost, what do you embody? Teach that. Don't try to teach everything. What do you embody? You're a manifestation coach? Great. Show me what you've manifested. I don't want some principles or theory in a book that you've read or learned somewhere. Show me what you've manifested in your life. And then we can have a conversation about maybe me hiring you. I want evidence.
Okay.
So I think if there's one line, take clients through the journey of what you already embody, because you'll be so insanely successful, it won't even be funny.
So let's frame the question slightly differently. Say a woman is listening to the podcast and they're going, I want to be more authentic. What would be some practice that you can offer me, or something that I can try based on your experience of life? What would be 1 or 2 or 3 things that you could offer to a woman that is listening to this?
Absolutely. One of the most incredible practices. You could do it for 10 days, 30 days. I always recommend 90 days for it to really, really take hold inside of your body. For 90 days, every morning when you wake up, don't even turn your phone on unless you've used it for your alarm. Shut your alarm off. Make your way to the nearest mirror where you normally would brush your teeth. This is what I've been doing for years, is for 3 minutes every morning. Hair wild and crazy, just like, in a t-shirt that I just came out of bed in. I meet myself every morning in the mirror, and there's not an ounce of judgment that is allowed into that space. This is honor, and this is reverence. What I find every day is different. What I meet every day is holy. Many days I'm standing there and tears are running down my face. There is nothing more authentic than reflecting back my soul to myself. I'm not in the mirror in beratement or deficit. I'm there to honor and revere. And what comes up and what is brought to me to the surface and in my soul carries me through the entire rest of the day. It is the most authentic and raw practice, particularly as a woman, because we're not conditioned to do anything in front of the mirror other than criticize ourselves. So that would be one. Next, I would say to learn to be with the art of dancing alone for yourself, no one watching, to the slowest sensual music, but dancing under the beat. And paying attention to what you feel in your body, noticing the power that resides there, and the messages that get stirred up, what comes up. Another beautiful, one of my most favorite, regular, authentic practices for connection with my soul and myself. And then third, I guess, for me, nature is always such an equalizer of the truth. It brings me straight to the truth. I fortunately live right by the beach. So on days where I need to, let's say I'm on the cusp of making a pretty big decision and I could maybe almost go either way, I know it's time. Sneakers on, let's get to the beach, put the feet in the sand. In nature, I always find the answer without even having to press hard for it. So authenticity represents when Mother Nature is splashing on me and I feel her in my toes, I remind myself or connect with that more authentic part of me because I feel her permission to do it. She's wild, and she allows me to be as honest and truthful with myself as possible.
So beautiful, so beautiful. And I want to acknowledge that also at least 2 of those practices I do as a man as well. And I just want to kind of acknowledge and say, yes, it works kind of a thing, is because I started doing mirror work is kind of what the first practice also sometimes would be called. So I had huge body issues like myself. Like I used to be overweight and I used to hate everything about myself. Say 3 years ago, 3 years ago. Yeah. Like right around my daughter was born, was the time when I had the first realization of how it was really impacting me, like how it was really, really impacting me, how I was as a parent, how frustrated I used to get, how mad I used to get, all of that stuff, and how I was just not living my honest self, my real self. And so one of the practices that really changed my life, and I still practice it till day, every single day, every morning. I would get completely naked. It's after the kids have gone to school and I have some private time, is when I would get naked every single day, completely naked, and just talk to my body. And that is the biggest practice where now I have the energy more than I've had in the longest time. I am fitter. I love myself more than I've ever loved myself. Everything has been great ever since I started doing that one work, which is talking to yourself. I take maybe like 10 minutes. I still take probably 10 minutes just talking to my body, just acknowledging it, being grateful for it, and all of it. So absolutely beautiful work. Thank you for sharing it. It is one of the most important work I do every single day. The third one, which I practice slightly differently, I live in Austin, which does not have a beach.
Yeah.
Or it is, but it's really stinky. It's nearby, so we don't go to the beach. But I have beautiful green belts. So they have like protected areas, just green and beautiful and nice. And once every 2 or 3 days, I would go away for about an hour, just time with me and nature, just walk in nature, go to these belts just by myself and take the time to listen to myself, listen to what nature wants to tell me, whatever's the message, whatever is the message, just be with me. I think it's one of those practices that has also profoundly changed my life. The second practice that you mentioned, I have not practiced it, but I know Nita is my wife.
Yes.
She practices it, and she learned it from Sheila Kelly. Do you know of a Sheila Kelly?
Yes, with S Factor.
Yeah, S Factor.
Yes.
Yeah. She's gone to S Factor like 3 times, I feel like,
Yes.
at this point. Like, ever since she discovered it, I think she goes every year.
Yes.
And she absolutely loves it. That's
Yes.
her sacred practice, and she does the same practice like you talked about. And I know it changed her relationship with herself because she shared that with me. So I know it is such a beautiful practice what you shared. It's absolutely amazing. So thank you for sharing that. I know they all work either for me or it has worked for my wife, so I'm aware of them. So thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
Amanda, what I find is, irrespective of where we are in our journey, at least for me, what is present to me is that I still have some insecurities. There are certain things that I'm like, oh crap, it's still there.
Yes.
Right. And I find it helpful in our
Yes.
podcast to share that with people.
Yes.
So I ask my guests always, hey, is there any insecurity that you're still dealing with? So it can, person that's listening or watching this can go, I'm not alone. Is there something that you would like to share?
This is a great question, and I'm going to be really honest with you. At 51 years old, I have done so much journeying and so much work. I think I've arrived at one of the most powerful, peaceful, aligned, integrated places in my life, that even the places that at time I feel like maybe uncomfortable or awkward, which I have to be really honest isn't often, when I do, I'm like, okay, all right, let's just breathe through it. You're human, you're having a human moment. But is there a theme that comes up over and over and over again? I don't know. I'm so in the depths of my humanity that I don't have a particular, and it's not because I have it all figured out. I think the amount of grace and compassion that is on the path, and I think because of the transformational power of the mirror practice for me, I'm pretty free. I'm quite free in the way that I move in my life and in the world. Would I like to be maybe a little more tone and muscular at this part of my life? Yes. Do I have goals set for the next couple of months to build more toneness within my body as muscle mass changes as you age? That would be a for sure.
Yeah.
That would be a for sure.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. What is a belief that you'd like to offer to the world?
The belief that aging women hold the keys and the answers to so much of the suffering in humanity and in the world. And if we're willing to sit and pull up a chair and listen to them and not be afraid, I think that we would learn so very much.
Amanda, this was a beautiful conversation. How can people learn more about you, discover more of your practices, discover more of your learnings and trainings?
Yes, absolutely. My handles on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram are Midlife Muse. And I have a wonderful program you can learn about on my website, amandahanson.com. I have a membership space where women from all over the world are journeying with me on a daily basis. And I am constantly in there coaching, teaching live at a very accessible, affordable fee for no matter where your situation is and where you are. That's so beautiful. We're building global sisterhood and community inside of my spaces.
I'll thank you for doing everything that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.